big money power, accidents don't just happen, and coincidence is only an excuse for the guilty. Welcome to the Conspiracy Chronicles.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We must not fail to comprehend its grave implications.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
There has been an attempt, as perhaps you know now, on the life of President Kennedy. He was wounded in an automobile driving from Dallas Airport into downtown Dallas. The flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Good evening. Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee.
Senator Robert Francis Kennedy died at 1:44 a.m. today, June 6, 1968.
An incident that took place less than 15 minutes ago at the Washington Hilton Hotel when shots were fired at President Reagan.
A second bomb has been found inside that federal building in Oklahoma City.
The whole side has collapsed?
The whole building has collapsed.
The whole building has collapsed?
The building has collapsed.
That's the southern tower you're talking about.
Exactly, the second building.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th. Malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
And now, here are your conspiracy detectives, Joe Joseph and Tim Watts.
Joe Joseph and Tim Watts it is, and welcome everybody to this edition of the Freedom Links Conspiracy Chronicles right here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. And boy, Timmy, you know, last week we talked about the CFR, kind of gave a background on what the Council on Foreign Relations is and what they're about. And tonight we take it a step further, don't we? Yes, tonight.
Oh, yes, we do. Now we show how they control the two-party political system in this country. And folks, you know, you want to know this. You want to understand how everything is controlled, and nothing ever changes. Like when we went from the Bush administration.
Yeah, when we went from the Bush administration on, and here's the issue. Here's the issue. The two-party system that we have in this country is a big farce. It's a big farce. It's been for quite some time. But it's the CFR and a lot of these nefarious people that actually push it. They push this false left-right paradigm. So tonight we're going to discuss that a little bit and get into it. One thing that I want to put out, and folks, if you don't know, our good friend Mike Powers had his first broadcast Saturday night, 10 to 12. Fantastic host. Did great for his first time out, and we look forward to having him back again every Saturday from 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Eastern right here on Orion. So show your support and tune in. Tune into his broadcast. Now, getting back to this, the left-right paradigm, you know, there's different things that actually cause this divide in the United States. And I'm going to start out with seven things, and then we'll get into how it is the CFR actually manipulates this stuff. First thing is simply we've changed. Studies such as one done earlier this year by Pew Research Center for the People and the Press indicate that we simply become more divided as a people over political lines. Democrats have become increasingly more secular and more supportive of environmental regulations than Republicans. Meanwhile, Republicans have been increasingly more conservative. A Pew study found that in 1987, 62% of Republicans agreed that government should take care of people who can't take care of themselves. 25 years later, Republican support for that statement dropped to 40%. So you're actually seeing a return to the original grassroots, what GOP meant when it first started. Now, again, I don't prescribe or recommend going to one side or the other, picking a party or not, because what happens is it inserts a bias and it takes away your ability to think things through without any interference.
Yeah, it puts blinders on you, Joey. You start thinking, one side or the other. When we talked about this before, really, folks, everybody has their own conservative opinions and everybody has their own liberal opinions. It's just the human nature. Not everybody will agree on everything. But the minute you push one camp into the right and one camp into the left, you now have a divide. And that's what our political system is. I mean, you wake up, the morning after the election day, and it's like the Super Bowl. Did my team win or did my team lose? And then everybody, one team is pissed off for 4 years, while the other one gets to go, yeah. And it's a political divide, and it's fomented by the CFR.
Right on.
By design.
That's right. Another reason, racial and geographical realignment, Tim. Although the percentage of white people in the Republican Party have remained largely the same in recent years, about 85%. The number of non-white Democrats has grown. The percentage of white Democrats dropped from 64 to 55%. Meanwhile, as the coasts have become bluer, the South and parts of the West have become more red. It's becoming a lot more divided. A lot more divided. And this is all by design, folks. We also have the loss of Southern Democrats. Once a haven for moderate Democrats with enough political strength to nearly qualify as their own political party, the South has moved to become almost uniformly Republican, a move that was in part fueled by civil rights legislation of the 1960s, though some experts say the realignment was well underway before then. With the loss of the Southern Democrats, however, a safe spot for moderates has been increasingly difficult to find. What's interesting, Tim? Why is it so bad to be independent?
Yeah, and they've made it a dirty word these days. An independent just can't win. And that's what they want. They want you to think that, and it's, with Romney, the Republicans were so scared that Obama would win, and for Democrats, they were so scared that Romney would win. Everybody was too afraid to do what they really wanted to do to begin with, and vote for Ron Paul or Gary Johnson,
right.
Because it was stuck into their brain that they can't win, and so you've got to choose the lesser of two evil, and thus you've fallen right into their left-right trap again.
Amen to that. And welcome aboard, John King. It's about time we were able to get a hold of you, and I'm sure you have something very interesting to add to this conversation.
Yes, I do. The mere fact that most people will acknowledge the Republicrats and know that both mainstream political parties look exactly alike, that's because they are exactly alike, because most of them belong to the Council on Foreign Relations, and they all have one agenda. They're there just to give the illusion of choice. There's no choice.
That's
the people that are actually running things are behind the scenes. These are just little marionettes, folks. And guess what? Yay, my team won! No, your team didn't win.
That's right.
They're just there to give you the illusion of choice. As George Carlin said, you have no choice.
That's right.
It's been taken from you.
Well, another reason they say that's adding to this divide is redistricting, although the overall impact is disputed. Some experts point out that congressional redistricting is a potential cause of polarization. Case in point, we just had a runoff in Ohio because of redistricting. You had Marcy Kaptur and Dennis Kucinich's districts merge, and they had a runoff. And as a result, Kucinich is out. Now tell me something, Timmy.
Yeah.
Tell me the CFR didn't want Kucinich out of there.
Oh, no. There's the two guys that they hated the most in the 2008 campaign was Dennis Kucinich and Ron Paul. Matter of fact, those were the only two guys in that campaign that were not CFR candidates.
That's right.
Every single person in the 2008 campaign was CFR, except for Kucinich and except for Paul. And look what happened to both of them. The two people that want to get rid of the Federal Reserve and that want to look into the CFR.
That's right. And when we come back from break, we'll continue our coverage of the Great Divide and how the CFR almost single-handedly engineers that divide. So don't go away. We'll be right back. This is the Conspiracy Chronicles of the Orion Talk Radio Network. Don't go away.
Folks, Connecticut firearm manufacturer Ruger has made it easier for you to petition your local congresspersons and let them know how you truly feel about a restriction of our Second Amendment right to defend ourselves from predators and a government gone awry. Please take the time to click the ad link on the front page of the Orion Talk Radio website and help defend our Second Amendment right. Joe Joseph here, along with Tim Watts and John King. We're discussing the left-right paradigm tonight and how it is that the Council on Foreign Relations actually gets to controlling all this because, of course, and I mean, you could call it CFR, trilateralists, they're all involved. CFR, of course, that's the biggie. That's the major one. That was the first one that was around before any of the other ones. And they've all spawned off from that. Ain't that right, Johnny boy?
That's exactly right. That is the head of the proverbial beast right there.
Now, there's other, I said redistricting before the break is some reasons why they throw out there as to why there's such a great divide. But now we start to get into, the meat and potatoes. News media, hyperbole, and money. There's a strong case to be made that horse race, winner-take-all campaign coverage, as well as the almost instantaneous reporting of any candidate's missteps, creates a circumstance that encourages hyper-partisanship as the most critical or supportive voices swing into reaction mode. But there are also concerns that a never-ending campaign cycle, fueled by the need to raise ever-increasing amounts of money, forces candidates to take a harder line than they otherwise would to attract the most fervent and unbending supporters. See, I'm setting everybody up with these 7 reasons they give us as to why this left-right divide is there. And then we're going to get into the real left-right divide. So I want people to understand that these are some reasons that the mainstream media throws out there for us to understand. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, we also have systematic problems. Just some experts say polarization and partisanship was more than the norm than the exception through most of U.S. history, and that's that it's only the relatively nonpartisan period following World War II that makes it seem unusual. Certainly the country has been through periods of gridlock and heavy partisanship before, but some congressional scholars and political analysts say the American system as currently constituted, especially with the use of the Senate filibuster requiring a supermajority for anything to pass, has increased the value of hyperpartisanship along either side to deliver a blow to the other. And we have high stakes. Since Republicans took the House for the first time in 40 years in 1994 on a strongly partisan message, majority control has often been by relatively slim margins, giving members of the minority good reason to take a hard line in hopes of defeating and winning back control in the next election. And while the Senate was once seen as a place where more moderate members would thrive, partisanship fueled by the threat of filibuster, if not outright control, has become more the mood in the chamber as well. The CFR identifies itself as a nonpartisan and non-governmental organization, which is understandable since they own or control all of the viable horses in the U.S. presidential race. Left unchecked in their quest for global domination, they will soon own the whole racetrack. So yes, of course they're nonpartisan and non-governmental, But they own everything. Ain't that right, Johnny boy?
That's exactly right. Preach on, preach on.
Well, it shouldn't be surprising that most presidential candidates in the 2008 election are CFR members. Otherwise, the funding does not exist to wage even a primary campaign. The CFR, through its members, provides for the seed money, the staffers, and the policymakers for each of its primary candidates from both of the major parties. The Democrats' CFR member candidates in 2008 U.S. primary election were Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, John Edwards, Chris Dodd, and Bill Richardson. Meanwhile, on the Republican side, you had Mitt Romney, Rudy Giuliani, Fred Thompson, Newt Gingrich, and last but certainly not least, John McCain. You had Mike Huckabee, who is a CFR wannabe who tried to hire CFR advisors to his short-lived campaign. The only top-tier candidate who's not a CFR clone is Congressman Ron Paul, an outspoken critic of the CFR, who the CFR-controlled major media supports any attempt to portray him as a nutcase. As the 2008 primary races heat up, the upper echelon of the CFR began to pull the plug on each of the horses, one by one, until the public was left with the CFR's designated Republican and Democrat choices, Barack Obama and John McCain. Once the CFR previously decided choices were selected, they were provided with a CFR-loaded committee that selected the candidates' running mates for vice president. I mean, you don't get much more controlled than this. You know, candidates don't advertise their CFR membership to the public, and it appears that they are actually given strict orders to deny their CFR affiliation. When Obama made his now infamous fundraising pitch to a group of fellow elitists in San Francisco portraying Pennsylvanians as clinging to their guns or religion, fellow CFR member Hillary Clinton made the mistake of tagging Obama as a elitist, and she was immediately vilified by the CFR media for identifying Obama for what he really is, a global elitist who had sworn allegiance to the CFR's New World Order and one world government. By publicly outing Obama as an elitist, Hillary stepped over the line, and the CFR shortly thereafter hammered the final nail in her campaign coffin. As anyone in the know in Washington, New York, and Boston corridor recognizes, the term elitist is code word for global elitist and therefore labels one as a CFR member and a New World Order supporter. For the rest of us common folk, us common people who unwittingly perceive political diversity in the two-party system, we have been conditioned to instinctively deny that such a mass deception could ever be hidden in plain view, even when the deception is as clear as daylight. Barack Obama can be seen on a YouTube video being confronted during a town hall meeting and pointedly asked if he was a CFR member. Obama did a little oral shuffle and attempted to make a joke of the inquiry, but he never really provided an answer. Both Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, by the way, are CFR members, and Rockefeller family interests have financed and supported both of them in their educations and careers. Isn't that interesting, Johnny King?
It's very interesting considering now he answers to them.
That's right. That's right. So just remember, folks, that if you ever want to get to the bottom of a story, if you ever want to find out what people are all about, follow the money. Let me tell you something. You don't get elected president these days or into any major political office of any sort of substance or anything like that unless you have a well-funded machine in place to do it. Otherwise, you have to do a grassroots campaign. Well, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. That's what we do every day. Informing the masses is a grassroots campaign. Only good change starts from the bottom up. These elitists that fund from the top down, they don't bring about good change. And when we come back, we'll talk more about how the CFR influences the left-right divide in this country. So don't go away. Much more to come when the Freedom Links Conspiracy Chronicles continues right here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. We'll be right back. With all the talk of a gun ban and the usurpation of our Second Amendment rights, Orion Talk Radio urges everyone to start calling your elected representatives. Call the Capitol Hill switchboard at 202-224-3121 and ask for your congressional representative and let them know that you're not going to take this. Please call or email your congressperson today and get out now and start mobilizing protests. Don't wait like the British did. Make your voices heard now. Speak up for your Second Amendment right, because at Orion Talk Radio, we're fighting hard to keep it. Joe Joseph here, along with Tim Watts and John King. The discussion tonight is the CFR. Now, Timmy, we're getting into the meat and potatoes of this here CFR thing, and boy, I'll tell you what, they really do have a handhold and a grip on just about everything, don't they?
They control everything in this country. You know, yesterday at the guns rally, you know, across America, I spoke to a guy, you know, that it was wonderful to run into one person who actually knew about the CFR, and we talked at great length about how they've controlled everything in this country since 1921, you know, including the two-party political system. And, you know, one thing I wanted to throw out is that, you know, our political system was set up by our founding fathers, and they didn't want anything to do with political parties or factions. You know, and it wasn't because they didn't know about political parties. It's just the fact that they were unwelcome. Because when they were looking at Europe, our forefathers didn't want to become like them, because they realized that there would become conspiracy, hostile divisions, all the things that come with political parties. And they were afraid that such a system would rip apart the Union. And they were absolutely right. What they hoped for is that free elections would be natural for the best man that was out there to rise to the top. But the CFR has usurped that entire process now, taking away what our founding fathers envisioned for us.
Yep. No, they certainly have. I mean, and it's evidence, especially now more than ever. You know, the evidence is there for just to illustrate this. You know, time after time, all you have to do is just take a look. Look at how they unfold. I really truly think, Tim, that the last two elections where Ron Paul was a viable candidate actually really showed beyond a shadow of a doubt just how much they manipulate the elections, especially through the use of their mainstream media mouthpiece. You know, that's the biggest thing. Look at how they vilified Paul. All you have to do is look at that. And it had nothing to do with facts. They totally ignored him. They went, you know, look at this last election with Iowa. Remember Iowa? How it was such a big, and remember, well, we got this, it's down to Romney and Pawlenty and all this. When Paul got, what was it, like, it wasn't like a fraction of a percent less than Bachmann. Remember that?
Yep.
I mean,
yep.
And they
that was
totally,
in the straw poll.
Yeah. And they just totally disregarded him, didn't they?
Yeah, they didn't talk about him at all. You know, the guy barely beats Bachmann in the straw poll, and nobody says a word. But they talk about, I think they were talking about guys that weren't even in the race at that time, and that was what was his Texas governor?
Rick Perry.
Yeah,
that's
Rick
right.
Perry. They started talking about Rick Perry rather than Ron Paul.
That's right, and they're like, and the only reason why I remember this is because the Comedy Central had the Daily Show.
Yeah.
And Jon Stewart had a piece on it about why are they ignoring Ron Paul? And they were talking about that Ames straw poll, and you know, they come out with this thing. They said, and let's not count out John Huntsman.
Yeah.
I remember he got like 77 votes. 77 votes. Then he's like, dude, the sub shop down the street, it can hold more people than he got votes. And he's a viable candidate. Get out of here, But, I mean, that's it. They'll talk about Huntsman, who gets 77 votes. Meanwhile, Ron Paul, who I can't even remember how far he was off. I know it was really close.
Oh, yeah, real close.
Number 2, and they won't talk about him. They won't even say, oh, he's not a legitimate candidate. No.
We knew the night, the elections were happening. The first caucus, when we knew, Paul had probably won down there, but yet they all said, no, Paul didn't win. They held out all the precincts where Paul was strong, all the college and the university towns, and the fix was in from that night on.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right. In his book, The Rockefeller File, freelance journalist and best-selling author Gary Allen declared, quote, Rockefeller gang's plans for monopolistic world government are never but never discussed in the machines of mass misinformation. By now, you probably already know why you haven't heard of the hidden evil or the coming socialist dictatorship in the mainstream news. The people who are installing its control, they control the media. Quote, why don't investigative news shows like 60 Minutes tackle the trilateralist CFR hold on our government? Surely such material would have sufficient audience appeal. And, Tim, I really think it would. Look at the crime shows. Just take a look at that. On Discovery, you have all these investigative shows, another 48 Hours, all this kind of stuff that talk about criminal activity. People are drawn to these type of shows and this type of subject matter. And you're right. Why wouldn't 60 Minutes or all these, Dateline, NBC or whatever it is, why don't they pick this up and run with it? It's because they're controlled.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, there's 2 members of the 60 Minutes crew that are CFR members themselves.
That's right. That's right. These so-called founders of such giants as the New York Times and NBC were chosen, financed, and directed by Morgan, Schiff, and their allies. Regarding the beginning of the takeover of the mainstream news, a prime mover in this process was J.P. Morgan. We talked about that last week. He was the original force behind the CFR. Sam Perloff quotes Congressman Callaway's notation in the Congressional Record, Volume 54, dated February 9th, 1917, which stated, quote, in March 1915, the J.P. Morgan interests got together 12 men high up in the newspaper world and employed them to select the most influential newspapers to control generally the policy of the daily press of the United States. The record continued, quote, these 12 men found it was only necessary to purchase the control of 25 of the greatest newspapers. Emissaries were sent to purchase the policy, national and international, of these papers, and an editor was furnished for each paper to properly supervise and edit information regarding things of national and international nature considered vital to the interest of the purchasers. This policy also included the suppression of everything in opposition to the wishes of the interests served. This is Congressional Record, folks. You want to find it? Again, it is dated, this is Volume 54, dated February 9th, 1917 of the Congressional Record. And I mean, John, we talk about this all the time, but to a lot of people, they're surprised by this, especially people just waking up. They're surprised by the fact that there are nefarious forces that have pretty much hijacked the information stream and our lives,
Well, it's easier to see, Joe, because many of us, myself included, we're raised with the idea of mom and apple pie and we're number one and nobody can beat us and hooray for freedom and just look at one single vision of America and how we are supposed to be, not how we are now, but we're brought up with that mentality. So it's very, very difficult to look at the press and say, hey, you're misleading me or the public, because we're always taught that we have these bills of rights, one being the freedom of the press. And how can the state manipulate the press, Mr. King? That could never happen. Not here.
No, that's right. And the other thing that I want to put out is that, the CFR needs to reach the mass audience of Americans who do not belong to or attend the meetings of or read material distributed by the propaganda organizations. The Council on Foreign Relations leaders are aware of this need, and they've met it. Allen agreed when he wrote, quote, public opinion is manufactured by the CFR's ventriloquists in the mass media. Now, just so you know, Gary Allen wrote None Dare Call It Conspiracy. He's also a New York Times journalist and Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter. So, folks, coming from good sources here. We'll be right back. Last segment of hour number 1 on the way. Don't go away. Welcome back, folks. Ryan Talk Radio welcomes a new show to the lineup with the Manford Minute. Live from Canada, Monday to Friday at 8 p.m. Get the lowdown on what's happening around you with the Manford Minute, weekdays from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. Timmy, it was during the break that I was thinking, and I know you warn me about that all the time, and I really should cut back on that. But I was thinking, and, it was a while ago we were discussing how the Citizens United decision really played into this, too. That was a major, major thing that happened. And, you look at the way the court's made up. At least 2 of the justices I know off the top of my head are members of the CFR, and that's Breyer and Ginsburg.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that was one of the most aberrant things to happen to our political system, because now you just turned it over lock, stock, and barrel to the rich,
to the CFR.
To the corporations. Yep, to the CFR.
To the CFR, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was a major decision that really, when you can say that a corporation is a person, well, first of all, anybody that knows this whole sovereign movement, they understand that, your personal identity that you see on your Social Security card makes you a corporation. You are a corporation. I'm the corporation of Joe Joseph. It's a crappy name, I'll tell you that, for a corporation. But anyway, that Citizen United decision was integral in being able to just open the floodgates of money for the CFR interest. Wasn't that right, Timmy?
Yeah. And it basically just solidified their hold on our system now, because it's nothing but Democrat, nothing but Republican. I mean, they can just swamp you with so much money that there is no hope for somebody that has a solid grassroots, movement like Ron Paul did. I mean, he had a better grassroots movement in this country than anybody's had in decades. And for somebody like that to get held out, it's only big money that does it.
That's right. So anyway, just understand, folks. I mean, this is it's almost a full assault, on our ability to be able to. Well, first of all, there's no such thing as a real election anymore. We've already shown you and proven that stuff is, it's been hijacked. But that Citizen United decision just opened the floodgates for these people. Now, former CFR member Admiral Chester Ward described the CFR's influence in the mass media, too. He proclaimed, quote, they control or own major newspapers, magazines, radio, and television networks, and the most powerful companies in the book publishing business, the Associated Press, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, They have their own wire services, which most mainstream media outlets use. But that doesn't stop there, does it, Tim?
No, not at all. They just control everything. Matter of fact, the CFR has an entire roster of people who do nothing but lobby for the CFR on both sides of the aisle. So it doesn't really matter to them which side gets in power. They've got their little minions that do their work for either side.
No, that's right. I mean, they do. They do have their minions. Now, Ross observed, quote, the CFR could not accomplish their goals without complicity of the mainstream news media, which they absolutely control with an iron fist. He explained that, quote, occasionally they will hold a public meeting and invite the open press, including C-SPAN, in order to give the impression that they are a harmless group engaged only in social activities. Meanwhile, at their meetings, you got people like Zbigniew Brzezinski that are talking about how today it's so much easier to kill 1 million people than to, what was it? I can't remember the exact quote. But anyway, he's talking about, genocide. And, he's just talking about it, really. It's no big deal. Gary Allen refers to the mainstream media as CFR ventriloquists and writes, quote, at the center of the insider power, influence, and planning in the United States is the pervasive Council on Foreign Relations. He adds, the CFR was created by the Rockefellers and their allies to be the focus of their drive for a new world order. The focus. They are the center point. Got to remember, they came first. Bilderberg, Trilateral Commission, Club of Rome, all that stuff came after the CFR. 1991, we played this audio last week, Tim. Quote, we are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, maybe I should say it like him, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises for discretion almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to lights of publicity during those years. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries. I mean, that's what he said. That's in his own words, guys.
You sound like a demented leprechaun.
Well, he looks like a demented leprechaun. I mean, what else is there to say about that? And thank you, honey. She just gave me it's infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people. Yeah? What are you trying to do, Z? You trying to give us a little insight in what's coming? Other outlets allegedly under the control of the CFR include NBC, CBS, Time, Fortune, Look, Newsweek, New York Post, Denver Post, Louisville Courier-Journal, Minneapolis Tribune, and the night papers. How about publishing houses? McGraw-Hill, Simon & Schuster, Harper Brothers, Random House, Little Brown and Company, Macmillan Company, Viking Press, Saturday Review, Business Week. Oh, and by the way, the Book of the Month Club. Who ever thought the Book of the Month Club would be hijacked? I certainly didn't. But the mainstream media appears to serve multiple functions. First, to distribute information that the controlling cabal wants you to believe is real news. Secondly, to assist in the cover-up of information that is leaked out through other sources. In other words, damage control. Thirdly, as a weapon to assassinate the characters of those who expose the practice of the establishment. Also, to act as a firewall to prevent information detrimental to the elite's control for reaching the public. Finally, to continue to reinforce mainstream accounts of current and historical events. The mainstream news essentially serves as a primary tool for social conditioning or mind control. Now, isn't it easy when you talk about the left-right paradigm? That's all been put there how? That's all been put there through the mind control and the subversive tactics of the mainstream media. And that just doesn't mean news, folks. Media. Tim, what's the definition of media?
Well, that's everything. It's like radio, newspaper, television, even the internet is media now.
Right. But,
they don't have such a stronghold on the internet right now, which is how this truth comes out.
No, that's right. You're right. And that's the thing and that's where they're scared, because they don't have control of the internet, which is why they're trying so hard with past legislations like SOPA and PIPA and this new internet cybersecurity crap. They want to control it. Oh, no, don't worry. We're not going to. No, nobody's going to get shut down. No, never. Oh, really? They talk about, well, we need to protect intellectual property. If you guys remember, there's a newsworthy story this year. Kim.com. You remember Mega Upload? He was shut down because he was violating intellectual property rights. Let me ask you folks something. Who's the biggest thief of intellectual property on the face of this planet? It's the United States government. They record, they store everything you say, you write, you read, you type. It doesn't matter what it is. It gets salted away in facilities in Utah and places all over the country. That's been acknowledged. That's been proven. So to say that Mega Upload is one of the biggest perpetrators of intellectual property theft is bunk. You write an email, it gets stored. You do a transaction, it gets stored. You write a book, it gets stored. You're in a movie, it gets stored. They're the thieves. Again, another reversal. Things are not the way they appear to be, folks. And again, where's the outrage? Well, you can't be mad at what you don't know. That's why we're working so hard and diligently to let you know who it is that does all this stuff. Quote, it's through the press and the media that the lie is penetrating through to the masses. And that's Professor Mars. The media is used as a weapon. So when you watch, read, or listen to the mainstream news, ask yourself, what will the CFR like me to believe today? Allen sums up the real purpose of the mainstream news, stating, quote, these are the establishment's official landscape painters whose job it is to make sure the public does not discover the CFR and its role in creating a world socialist dictatorship. And with that, we'll end hour number 1. Hour number 2 on the way. When we come back, we'll have the King's Court. And then we'll roll right back into this, folks. A lot to cover in an hour. So sit tight. We'll be right back. Folks, don't forget, immediately following the Freedom Links Conspiracy Chronicles is the Information Nation with Ken. That's right, he'll be taking off at 9 p.m. Eastern and talking about the issues of the week that are important to us all and giving it and presenting it in a fashion that only Ken can do. So make sure you stay tuned for the Information Nation with Ken Hildebrand right here, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Orion Talk Radio Network. Joe Joseph, Tim Watson, John King here. And before we get back to our CFR conversation, it's time to call the King's Court into session. John King, take it away.
America is in a dictatorship, and Obama is the dictator-in-chief. Tonight's show is about the illusion of your choice and the left-right paradigm. I could write a 2 or 3 minute King's Court about how the two dominant political parties are the same. But that's too easy. So I thought I would throw in some truth bombs into tonight's show to give you something to think about. Many politicians today are members of the CFR. Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan was, and even Hillary and William Jefferson Clinton. Many senators are congressmen, and congressmen are also members of the CFR. Bam! Truth bomb. Big deal, you might say. Well, think about it. We have an organization that sole purpose is to undermine our national sovereignty, and we have Washington politicians as members. Now, it's just not Republicans and Democrats. It's everyone. That's why the two mainstream political parties look exactly the same, because they're working for the same goal. Bam! Another truth bomb. Now, you may say, how is this accomplished? Simple. Greed, my friends. Play ball, remain at your post. Speak out, then become controlled opposition or labeled a crackpot. For those of you that think the way out of this is an election, you're wrong. Listen, folks, when you can put your vote into a machine made by the military-industrial complex member like Diebold, then I ask you, are your votes truly counted, or do the results at the end lean towards their agenda? Think about it. In order to have a fair election, you must trust the vote counter. Can you trust the machine to count votes when that machine is made by a company that is a member of the military-industrial complex hell-bent on instituting a global agenda of the world government? Prove it, you may say, as they say it's impossible to hack. That there, my friend, is a lie. Look up and watch a video called Hacking Democracy. Your votes have been taken to give you the illusion of democracy. Now, you may say that Romney lost the election and his son manufactures the very voting machines used in that election. You would be crying foul, Mr. King, even if Romney won. Well, you're damn right, as there is no oversight. Romney did concede the vote rather quickly, don't you think? I mean, if I were him, I'd contest the vote all the way up to Obama saying I do. It does not matter who wins the election, the people lose, as the results are manipulated, and the candidates for the Democrats and Republicans all belong to the same club and have the same agenda. So while you go to work tomorrow thinking to yourself that Obama will make things better, realize this. The very tax dollars from your check don't go to pay the debt, and the government is borrowing money at an accelerated rate. For some of that money will go to countries like Afghanistan and Algeria, where it will be used to fight our troops and fund anti-U.S. sentiment. Not to mention that the U.S. government is fighting al-Qaeda in one part of the world and funding them in another. Someone please explain that one to me. The money is also getting spent on national security because our overgrown government has become paranoid and powerful. Now we are spiraling into a police state because the level of despotism is going to be so bad in this country and worldwide, and it will become apparent to everyone why the politicians want your guns, especially when the American people realize the politicians have sold our birthright. The quantitative easing has enslaved our grandchildren and leveraged our land as well as our homes in the derivatives markets. So go ahead, America. Keep believing that the Republicans are for businesses and corporations and the Democrats are for the common working man. Even though the face may change, the agenda is still the same. Run by a shadow government behind the scenes coordinating its efforts through organizations like the CFR. You will never see the real ruler of the U.S., just his presidential puppet. But it's, yay, my party won mentality that is keeping us in this situation. Wake up. It's not a party. It's a wake, you fool. Court adjourned.
Thank you, my friend. Very good indeed. You know, in talking about the CFR and their manipulation, I can think of a quote that really prefaces the control of media and all that stuff. And I'm harking back to Nazi propaganda minister Dr. Joseph Goebbels when he said, "Think of the press as a great keyboard on which the government can play." Of course, the government is the one that's controlled by these elitists because either they're all a part of this harmless little think tank that meets routinely up in New York and other places around the world, but mainly in their little New York cubbyhole. You know, from the descriptions that these researchers have given, an accurate analogy could be drawn from the Wizard of Oz. America and other NATO nations are the great and powerful Oz, which appear to be run by their respective leaders. The mainstream news is their curtain, which prevents us from understanding that the real controllers behind it are the think tanks, the Fed, Wall Street, and the tax-exempt complex. That's another big thing that we will have to dive into in a future Conspiracy Chronicles is the endowments. Another role of the mainstream news is to project the illusion of a two-party system. The grassroots Democrats and Republicans have their philosophical differences, but, says Allen, quote, as you move up the party ladders, these differences become less and less distinguishable until finally the ladders disappear behind the establishment managed news curtain and come together at the apex under the control of the CFR. Quote, there is no such thing as at this date of the world's history in America as an independent press. You know it, and I know it. The business of journalists is to destroy the truth, to lie outright. We're the tools of rich men behind the scenes. We're jumping jacks. They pull the strings and we dance. Our talents, our possibilities, our lives, and all our property are of other men. We are intellectual prostitutes. And that was journalist John Swinton at the New York Press Club in 1953. Most people pay attention to the events illuminated by these corporate-owned spotlights because they're big, common, socially accepted, and because they're all most people have ever known. When you start listening to independent news broadcasts, your conditioning begins to come undone. You start to connect the dots. And you find that events that were puzzling and seemed unrelated are part of the same picture. These independent news outlet broadcasts on shortwave, on webcasts, internet radio like Orion Talk Radio. Some have passed MP3 shows available for download. Some are on YouTube. By listening to these broadcasts, you can become familiar with who's really running the planet and what they've done and where they're taking you. Most of the topics discussed will never be covered on mainstream news. So always try to get your information from something other than the mainstream media because you have to follow the money. You follow the money and the control goes to the CFR. Now let's get into the control of history and education because this is huge when you start talking about left-right paradigm. This is, quote, according to some, history is basically a jumble of events, blunders, coincidences, and happenstances that have brought us to where we are today. That's Perloff that wrote that. Quote, however, seen in the context of globalist influence and maneuvering, history begins to make sense, as if snapping into place upon a calculated blueprint. In 1915, Mr. Basil M. Manley, Director of Research for a congressional investigation known as the Commission on Industrial Relations, observed that control of the information was being extended by the endowment of colleges and universities and through controlling of influencing the public press, wrote Wormser. During the Reese Commission hearings, Professor Kenneth Colgrove at Northwestern University testified, quote, the officers of these foundations wield a staggering sum of influence and direction upon research, education, and propaganda in the United States and even in foreign countries. When we get back, I want to talk about what the Reese Commission concluded about these endowments. And again, this is something that we could devote a whole show to. So when we come back, we'll talk about that and how they contribute to the narrative in this country. Don't go away. It's Truth from North of the Border with Canada Live, featuring John and Ron, Sunday afternoon from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern. Get a view of the truth from our northern neighbors as John and Ron team up to tell it like it is. Sundays from 12 to 3 right here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. And Johnny Boy, you were on there today with John and Ron on Canada Live, weren't you?
Yes, I was. Had a lot of fun. It was an honor to do the show. I always enjoy addressing our northern neighbors in the, as I jokingly say, the 51st state.
In the frozen tundra of Kanadistan, yes. No, they always do a good show. I love John and Ron, and I'm glad that they're a part of the Orion team. And gosh, folks, I mean, tune in. Another great show. And, you know, we've been getting a lot of interest, a lot of interest from Canada. And we've been getting, now we've got the Manfred Minute starting. He's a Canadian as well. So, I mean, a lot of common interest and a lot of fight that we share in common with each other. So it's always good to understand that this fight that we fight is not, it doesn't know any borders. You know, they're trying to take over the world, and we need all the help we can get in the fight. So hats off to John and Ron and Mr. Manfred for joining us to fight against the New World Order. Now, before the break, I was talking about the Reese Commission and how the endowments had, kind of got into this and really muddied the waters, especially when it comes to rewriting history. And the Reese Commission concluded, and this is a quote right from the record, the impact of foundation money upon education has been very heavy, largely tending to promote uniformity in approach and method, tending to induce the educator to become an agent for social change and a propagandist for the development of our society in the direction of some form of collectivism. Foundations have supported textbooks which are destructive of our basic governmental and social principles and highly critical of some of our cherished institutions. Wormser exposed the profound influence that foundations have on public education when he stated, quote, foundations giving most obviously has an enormous impact on education, on social thinking, and ultimately on political action. Oh, this influence reaches the public through the schools and academies, through publicity, and through education and other associations dedicated to public and international affairs, he sustained. Foundation grants have become so important a source of support that college and university presidents cannot often afford to ignore the opinions and wishes of the executives who distribute foundation largesse. Finally, he added, quote, the situation permits large foundations to exercise a profound influence upon public opinion. Senator Goldwater agreed, writing, quote, the intellectual influence of the academic community is subservient to the wealth of the great tax-free foundations. So, I mean, this is a very, very complex conspiracy. Oh, did I just say that? Did I say that word conspiracy again? And I have to remind everybody once again, it's not a bad word. Conspiracy theory is a good word. It's something you should be proud of. It means you're exercising critical thinking skills and thinking for yourself, looking outside the narrative. We have to be the detectives. We have to be the checks and balances in this age. And we have to expose the corruption and get to its core so we can stop this global takeover from happening. Foundations have supported a conscious distortion of history, reveals the Reese Committee. The phrase conscious distortion is a polite way of saying blatant lie. 20th century history, as recorded in establishment textbooks and journals, is inaccurate, stated Professor Sutton. The prevailing establishment version is seen to be not only inaccurate, but designed to hide a pervasive fabric of deceit and immoral conduct. Professor Sutton explained that they are effective, quote, not so much because of outright censorship, although that's an important element, but more because of the gullibility of the American educated public. And how do they become gullible? How do they become gullible? Well, the way they become gullible is, simply put, they're programmed. And this has been for now 100 years. The Reese Commission was in the 1950s. The independent investigator at the time, or the independent counsel, was Norman Dodd. If you go to the Freedom Link Radio's YouTube channel, you can go and watch one of the last interviews Norman Dodd did with G. Edward Griffin in 1982. And he gets into all this kind of stuff. Very interesting. And these endowments, you have to understand that a lot of these people that are part of these endowments, these nonprofits, are actually members of the CFR. You know, they're the intellectually elite and the wealth of the world. So understand, I mean, this is a multifaceted attack. Not only on the truth, but on our whole way of life. Professor Mars concludes that these historical lies are deliberately manufactured so the public will be easier to control. He charges, quote, the rewriting and deceitful misinterpretation of American and world history is one of the main methods used to manipulate and share public opinion. The establishment of the American Historical Society was no doubt an unprecedented step in instituting this diabolical plan to rewrite the past. You know, Charlotte Iserby writes a great book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. And she goes over a lot of this kind of stuff. Popeye's had her on the broadcast, and Popeye's going to have her on again soon. And if you haven't caught her last interviews, you should really check out the next time Popeye has her on, because she goes through all of this kind of stuff. You know, she was exposed to it, especially as part of the education department in the Reagan administration. She knows firsthand how this stuff is happening and how they've been co-opted. And, you know, there's a whole load of people out there, experts and everything else, that try to expose it. But you have to understand the money powers, they have deep pockets. They have a lot of power, and it's taken a long time to get there. This is nothing that's going to be shattered in one day, folks. This is something that we are going to have to take down and take it. It's going to be a long fight, a hard fight. The last thing that we can do, or that we should do right now, is to be compromising our values and our virtues. And we should not be giving any ground whatsoever when it comes to our God-given natural rights, which are currently under assault. And the most important one of those rights is the Second Amendment. And they know this because they can't execute the final plan to bring this all about until the American public is disarmed, or until you have your bolt-action rifles and your muskets. I hear the question all the time. Well, what do you need an AR-15 for? Because I can. That's why. And because the government has them. And I have a right to it. Obesity kills more people each year than gun violence. How about we ban food for all fat people? Can we do that? To hell with spoons. Let's just take the spoon out of the equation. Let's just ban the food. Can't get fat if you don't have food, right? Well, then you can have starvation. Oh. Well, if we take away the guns, we're going to have tyranny. So guess what? That's not a good solution. So let's just get rid of obesity. We'll just stop feeding people. Freaking ridiculous. Folks, when we come back, we'll continue with how the CFR has totally infiltrated the mainstream media complex, put about these left-right paradigms and these divide and conquer tactics, all with the express purpose of bringing about a new world order. Folks, don't miss the Medical Conspiracy with Dr. Carpenter and Randy Simmons at their new time, Saturday from 3 to 5 p.m. This is the news that the AMA and the FDA would rather you didn't hear. So don't miss this Medical Conspiracy Saturday from 3 to 5 right here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. So we're discussing how the CFR and these nefarious imps these demons, if you will, go about trying to corrupt and manipulate the information stream so that people are easily programmed, easily controlled, and we're taught exactly what they want us to know. Go ahead,
Joe?
John. Yes, sir.
I have my pagan Ouija board here, and I got a message from some of the demons. They don't want to be associated with the politicians.
Oh, well, excuse me. Sorry, but I'm going to lump you in just because it pisses you off. The accrediting agencies themselves may also be controlled by the tax-exempt foundations, as suggested by the Reese Committee. And, folks, you can go get the Reese Committee's meeting on Scribed, SCRIBD.com. If you look up Reese Commission, Reese Committee, you will find the congressional minutes from there. It's an extremely dry read, but I've read it, and I can tell you it is earth-shattering what you find in that. And that was in the 50s. Just like the McCormick-Dickstein Committee of the 20s, when they were looking into, these nefarious forces. And, you had, of course, Samuel Prescott Bush, and you had the Remington family colluding together on the War Industries Board. This stuff happens all the time, and it's always swept under the rug. But it's stated that the so-called accrediting organizations are extra-governmental, yet influence education to a considerable degree. For various reasons, colleges, universities, and specialized schools and departments today require, quote, accreditation. That is approval of one or more of these organizations which presume to set standards. Some of these accrediting organizations are supported by foundations. Quote, universities, hospitals, institutes, and learning societies sometimes supply nothing but their name labels affixed to what is actually a pet project of foundation managers, announced Wormser. According to Wormser, they pick the professors, they pick the topics, and they even pick the research staff. And they already know what the outcome is going to be. These doctors, professors, research staff, etc., are made well aware in advance that there will be a particular conclusion that they must arrive at. Not adhering to the predetermined conclusions will result in a denial of grants. Professor Sutton agreed, writing, quote, through foundations controlled by this elite research by this elite research by complaint and spineless academics, conservatives as well as liberals have been directed into channels useful for the objectives of the elite, essentially to maintain this subversive and unconstitutional power apparatus. Through publishing houses controlled by this same financial elite, unwelcome books have been squashed and useful books promoted. Quote, it's understandable, continues the professor. The universities and research organizations, depending on financial aid from foundations that are controlled by this same New York financial elite, would hardly want to support and to publish research on these aspects of authentic international politics. Books critical of the official account of history don't get reviewed or are not available through mainstream outlets. And according to author Perloff, historians that don't adhere to their version of history are often blacklisted. Smoot asks, where will you find a college administration that will not defend the Ford Foundation against all critics? If the college has just received or is in line to receive $1 million gift from the foundation. How far must you search to find college professors or school teachers who will not defend the foundation, which give $25 million at one time to raise the salaries of professors or school teachers? Not to mention the fact that, how much do we pay if you go to college? What's the average tuition of a college student? Number one. Number two, look at the debt. So not only is the education complex being given this vast sum of money for what? A piece of paper and programming you to know what they want you to know? Or it just doesn't stop there. Then the banks and now the government will make interest on the loans that you'll be paying off for the next 30 years because you've basically saddled yourself with a mortgage payment. And they say, why, you can't get anywhere unless you have a college degree. Baloney. I know, you thought I was going there, didn't you?
Mongo say, you want cheese on that?
Yes. But, I mean, what happened to American entrepreneurialism? Oh, that got snuffed out. How about mom and pops? Oh, that got snuffed out. You see, folks, a lot of the things that made America great was the fact that we were informed and that we took initiative. And now it's been kind of programmed out of us. And it's going to take a good generation of critical thinkers to reestablish that in this country, and for the politicians that we put in office to have the cojones to repeal some of these treaties that we've put into place, like NAFTA, like CAFTA. Because it's taken over 100 years to get to this place. We could make it all go away in a day. But unfortunately, the people in this country have been so programmed and the waters have been so muddied that it's going to take time in order for them to see it. Now, I'm of the personal opinion, John, that the reason why this gun grab is going down the way it is and why there's such desperation for it, because of the fact that, the narrative doesn't make any sense. The figures don't make any sense. It's because they have looted and plundered our society and this world to the point where the current system cannot function any longer and economic collapse is imminent. I mean, what are they going to do next? Right now, the American government is running off of the pension fund of federal employees. What's after that? 401ks? Gold? What's next, John?
Absolutely, Joe. Absolutely. They're going to take and pilfer away every penny they possibly can while trying to keep the majority of people asleep. But people are waking up and they know they've got to get this done soon, and they're starting to get sloppy about it, and that's where we have our end.
That's right. And it's going to go downhill fast. Society is going to go downhill fast when that happens. And they know that. That's why they got to take the guns away. Yeah. Yeah, just like my wife said, people will call. They're going to be making calls for heads to roll. And these guys are going to be like in their little bunkers, and they don't want you to have your gun. Allen observed that the Rockefellers, quote, do not pour money into local school board races. They put their bucks into the schools that train the teachers, and they finance the writing of the textbooks. He stated, quote, the family couldn't care less who controls the local school board. According to Allen, the publishing houses under CFR control also specialize in publishing school textbooks. Speaking of the movement by the Council on Foreign Relations to use professors in their deliberate campaign to rewrite the past, author Perloff noted, quote, the Council's steering committee moved to distinguish the roster by adding college professors. They hailed from campuses beholden to J.P. Morgan. Then, as Dr. Quigley observed, quote, the Wall Street contacts with these professors were created originally from Morgan's influence in handling large economic and academic endowments. This evidence suggests that mainstream schools and media are conduits for historical lies. It also suggests that they are a medium for social conditioning, also known as mind control. Professor Sutton observed, quote, the existing system of education is little more than a conditioning mechanism. It has little to do with education in the true sense and a lot to do with the control of the individual. This requires suppression of individualist tendencies and tendencies and a careful spoon-feeding of appropriate knowledge. Folks, we're going to break. When we come back, final segment of the broadcast. We'll get John King to chime in right after the break. You're listening to the Freedom Links Conspiracy Chronicles on the Orion Talk Radio Network. Don't go away. we head into the last segment of the broadcast, I'd like to remind everybody again that the Information Nation with Ken Hildebrand takes over as soon as the Conspiracy Chronicles concludes tonight. So make sure you stay tuned at 9 p.m. Eastern as Uncle Ken takes you on a tour of this week's mayhem, especially regarding the Second Amendment. He's been very outspoken about it, feels the same way that we do here at the Freedom Link, and I'll tell you what, I love him to death. I'll be tuning in. Make sure you tune in as well. That's the Information Nation with Ken Hildebrand right here on the Orion Talk Radio Network, 9 p.m. Eastern. John King, you had a comment to make, but we were up against the break, so go ahead. Give it to me.
I seem to remember in my high school and elementary days that the books that I was given by the school were made and printed by Macmillan. So check your children's textbooks, and if they're printed by Macmillan, they're being educated on by the CFR and being programmed on how to think, which is exactly what we said earlier. We're raised to believe in the red, white, and blue, mom, apple pie, and the American dream, and it's the look over here type of mentality while we hose you over here.
Right on. So I want to highlight just how this left-right paradigm is BS, right? And that you really have no choice when it comes to the candidates that are selected for you. So I'm going to give you some things that, were talking points running up to the 2012 election. And remember, these people are selected by the CFR and by these nefarious super elitists, if you will. But how about this? One candidate signed the NDAA 2012, which legalizes martial law and indefinite detention of innocent American citizens simply for peacefully protesting. The other candidate supported it. One candidate signed a 4-year extension of the Patriot Act, which can imprison American citizens indefinitely with no trial. The other candidate supported that. One candidate supports the assassination of American citizens suspected of participating in subversive activities. The other candidate supported that. One candidate has broken his promise and kept Gitmo concentration camp open, which also practices torture. Oh, the other candidate, he supported that too. And of course, I'm talking about Obama and Romney. The TSA has grown to include train stations under one candidate. The other candidate supports that too. One candidate maintains his support of Israel's foreign policies for the United States. The other candidate supports that. As a matter of fact, very chilling thing, I just saw Rand Paul go to Israel and have a meeting with the minds over there. The rite of passage, if you will. Very, very troubling as he starts the moves to make his 2016 bid. And believe me, folks, Rand Paul is no Ron Paul. Understand, just because he's Ron Paul's son, that doesn't mean spit to me. One candidate maintains his support of the war of aggression in Afghanistan. Guess what? So does the other one. One candidate ignores the Federal Reserve. The other candidate also ignores the Federal Reserve. One candidate has done nothing to prevent another Wall Street meltdown. The other candidate doesn't care either. One candidate supports open borders and legalizing illegal aliens. So does the other one. One candidate supports limiting our liberties, increasing surveillance of innocent American citizens. So does the other one. One candidate agrees that any citizen who rises up to the abuses by government are enemies of the state or terrorists. And the other candidate agrees with it. The building of FEMA concentration camps are in full force under one candidate, while the other one supports it. One candidate has secretly met with Bilderberg. It's also highly likely that the other candidate has, and we know has met with Bilderberg. Remember that when Romney met with Bilderberg? And both parties are owned by the same ruling class through campaign financing, political favors, and lobbying. There's no difference, folks, between the left and the right. Oh, yeah, you may have differences in ideology about, one may be a tree hugger. The other one will be, let's knock the trees down to sell the timber to make the money, And and they act like they don't like each other. But go to Washington, D.C. Go into some of the restaurants there and look at who's having lunch with one another. Look at who's perusing the town or painting the town red with each other. It's the same people. This is all a farce. You have to understand that. It's unbelievable that people believe that there's a difference. Maybe out in, Americana, especially out in rural America, everyday Joe Schmuckatelli, they may be starkly left or right or whatever, but they don't see through the crap because they still get their information from the mainstream media. And as long as you get the information from the mainstream media, you're basically getting it from the CFR. And if you're getting it from the CFR, then you're getting what they want you to know. And that's why it's so imperative, folks, that you shut your TVs off. Shut them off. Take the cable TV and throw it in the... you know what? I'll tell you what, that was probably one of the best things I think we ever did was got rid of that crap.
I don't have it either, Joe.
And you know what, John? It shows. Not soon after people take away that stuff, I hate to say, it's hard to say. It's just, it seems like today our senses are just so overwhelmed with stuff, and this whole social networking revolution. Yeah, it's got some definite great points as far as us being able to get the word out. But just go down the street and look at kids these days. They don't even look when they walk anymore because they're buried. Their faces are buried in these freaking smartphones doing texting and everything else. Is that the way we want our future generation to be? Just these programmed robots that just don't think for themselves anymore? Do we want our kids, when they sit down in front of the television set, to see vibrator commercials on primetime television? Do we want our children to live in a police state? Look at the last 10 years or 12 years, folks. We are, I can't even, I'm so mad. So mad at where this country is coming. Shame on everybody that's been asleep and continues to ignore the problem. After myself, after anybody in the alternative media has opened, or at least tried to open your eyes to it, shame on you. And so it's up to our generation to take this nefarious group, and I hate to call them elitists, let's call them demons. It's up to our generation to take them on. And I got news for you, and for all that are listening in that may be a part of that nefarious group and or work for that nefarious group, either directly or indirectly, I have a very simple message for you. We will win. I have the playbook. It's actually really easy to read and understand. And if you can take the time, see through the narrative that's being put in about, oh, wow, the Bible, it's not accurate. Baloney. Read it. Get you a KJV 1611 and read it. And I guarantee you, you will know what the plays are and how to do this and how to combat it and how to win. And guess what? In the end, we win. That's right. The playbook tells us that. So all we have to do is follow the playbook. It's really simple. You do that, and the blinders come off, and you see things for what they are. And what they are, folks, at the end of the day, is a battle of good versus evil. That's what this is all about. Everything that these people do is evil. So we have to be the warriors for light. And we can't be afraid that some jackbooted thug's going to kick down your door or anything else. Because guess what? If they get their way, they're going to do it anyway. So either you make your stand now and not give in to their BS, or you roll over like a dog and you're going to get kicked in the pants anyway. John, closing thoughts.
It's time to stand up, people. It's time to realize that this country is gone.
It is most certainly gone.
We were great. We're no longer great. And we need to work towards making ourselves great once again.
Yes, we do. And with that, that's the end of the broadcast, folks. We're going to be making this a series because this is very important information. And you have to understand where the control complex, where the head of it is, where the head of this beast system is. The CFR is the control system put in place by these elitists. And we here at the Freedom Link and Orion Talk Radio are dedicated to exposing them and defeating them. So tune in tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern, for the next edition of the Freedom Link. And stay tuned for Ken Hildebrand and the Information Nation coming up next, folks. Have a great evening. God bless.